So, when we talk about the story of jazz, we're not really talking about just one sound. It's more like a constant series of revolutions. It's this incredible journey, right? From the streets of New Orleans all the way to the global stage. Just one explosive, game changing idea after another. So, yeah, let's jump right in.
Okay, so where does this whole story even begin? Well, you gotta picture it. Turn of the century New Orleans, hot, humid, and just buzzing with life. And right at the heart of it all is this almost legendary figure, a guy named Buddy Bolden. He played the cornet, and people said his sound, it was so powerful and full of the blues, it was like he captured the very soul of the city. This right here, this is his band. And what you're looking at, it's basically the seed from which everything else grew.
And this quote, I think it just nails why New Orleans was the perfect place for this to happen. I mean, think about it. You've got this incredible melting pot of cultures African, Caribbean, French, Spanish, all mixed together in a way you just didn't see anywhere else in the South. For them, music wasn't just, a luxury or simple entertainment. No way. It was the language that held everyone together. It was absolutely essential. All right, so if this music was so essential, what did it actually sound like? Well, the first thing you need to know, maybe the most important thing, is that it was all about community. This was a sound that was built by people for people, all playing together.
So the first big revolution was this idea they called collective improvisation. Now, what is that? Well, imagine a really lively conversation where everyone's talking at once, but instead of being chaos, it somehow makes perfect, beautiful sense. That's what this was. You'd have a cornet player leading the way with the main tune, the clarinet just dancing and weaving all around it, and then the trombone comes in with these great rhythmic punches from below. It's this incredible balancing act, right? It's all about individual freedom, but also total group unity. You had to be listening to everyone else all the time. And this sound wasn't just in some club, it was literally everywhere. It poured right out onto the streets. These brass bands were a huge part of community life, playing for everything. Parades, picnics, even the famous jazz funerals. So this wasn't quiet, polite concert hall music. Oh no, this was the loud, vibrant, totally spontaneous soundtrack of life itself. Okay, so what happens next? This incredible local sound starts to travel. As the Great Migration takes people and their culture out of the South, jazz goes with them. It moves up the Mississippi River and just spreads across the country. And in the process, it completely transforms from this regional folk music into the most popular sound in all of America. And you can really see the change right here. Just look at the sheer scale of this band. Those small, scrappy groups from New Orleans, they started giving way to these huge, polished orchestras. And it makes sense, right? If you want to fill these massive dance halls in the Roaring '20s or give people an escape during the Great Depression, the music had to get bigger. It had to get louder. It had to get more organized. And that's the key thing to understand about swing. It was designed for everybody. It was made for mass appeal. You had this driving, four-on-the-floor beat that was just impossible not to dance to. And all that wild collective improvisation, it got a little, tamed. It was replaced by written arrangements for these big, powerful sections of trumpets and saxophones. It was so exciting, it was glamorous, and for a country going through some really hard times, it was this incredible unifying sound of just joy. But with all that massive success, there was a catch, a compromise. The very same structure that made swing so popular started to feel like a creative straitjacket for some of the musicians. All those tight written arrangements didn't leave a lot of room for that spontaneous fire. The thing that started jazz in the first place. And so, quietly, in the after-hours clubs of New York, a rebellion started brewing.
And not rebellion, it had a name, bebop. And look, this wasn't some slow, gradual change. Oh no, this was a conscious, radical from the past. After World War II, you have this new generation of players, and they wanted to take jazz from being popular entertainment and turn it into a high art form. They were demanding to be seen as artists, not just guys who played music for people to dance to. And this picture just says it all, doesn't it? We've gone from the huge, grand ballroom to this small, smoky nightclub. And look at the audience. They're not dancing. They're packed in tight, and they are listening, really listening. Because bebop was fast, it was complex, it was smart music. It was like a high-wire act for virtuosos, and it was absolutely meant to be listened to, not just have on in the background. This really lays out the whole revolution in black and white. It's like, for every single rule that swing had,
bebop came along and just shattered it. The big bands? Gone. Replaced by small groups, quintets. Music made for dancing? Nope. Now it's music made for intense listening. Simple, predictable music replaced with these incredibly complex, fast tunes. It went from mainstream appeal to being musicians' music. The focus snapped right back with a vengeance to the improvising soloist.
So after the white-hot intensity of bebop, you'd think maybe things would cool down. But jazz never stops. Instead, it kind of fractured. It sparked this huge conversation. Musicians started reacting to bebop's fire, and they started pulling the music in two totally opposite directions. And both were just as interesting, and they really reflected the different moods of post-war America.
So on the one hand, you get cool jazz, which was often linked with the West Coast. And it was just what it sounds like, a calmer, more laid-back reaction to all that bebop frenzy. Think intricate arrangements, a lighter sound. But then, on the other hand, you had hard bop, which basically doubled down on the intensity. These musicians felt like jazz was maybe losing touch with its roots, so they brought back all that raw feeling from the blues and gospel. They put the soul back in, creating this funky, powerful, hard-driving groove.
Okay, so think about it. Up to this point, every revolution we've talked about still kind of played by a certain set of rules, right? You had melody, you had harmony, you had rhythm. But then came the 1960s, with all the social and political upheaval, and a new generation of musicians started asking this really radical question. What if there are no rules at all?
And that question led directly to free jazz, which was maybe the most radical departure yet. I mean, this was the sound of the counterculture. This was music that was all about pure, raw, unfiltered expression. Musicians literally threw out the songbook. No more preset chord changes, no more standard song forms. It was about creating something completely spontaneous together, right there in the moment. It really pushed the definition of what music even is. But at the very same time, another group of musicians was looking outward, not inward. They saw what was happening in the world of rock and funk. They saw artists like Jimi Hendrix and James Brown playing for these enormous crowds, and they thought, why can't we do that? So they decided to just tear down the walls between genres. And the result? Fusion. This is where jazz literally plugged in. Suddenly, the acoustic piano gets swapped out for the electric Fender Rhodes. The upright bass is replaced by the electric bass guitar. And that subtle swing rhythm, it gets completely steamrolled by the powerful driving beat of rock and funk. It was loud, it was electric, and it just opened up this completely new sonic landscape for jazz musicians to play in.
So when you step back and look at the whole picture, you can see the history of jazz is really just this amazing series of revolutions, right? And each one is a perfect reflection of its time. You start with a communal sound in New Orleans, which then becomes dance music for a whole nation. Then an artistic rebellion claims its place as a high art. That sparks a conversation that splits into new styles. And then finally, the whole rulebook just gets torn to shreds. So the big takeaway here is that jazz is kind of defined by its refusal to be defined. It's a living, breathing thing. It's always moving, always questioning itself, always reflecting the world around it. And if it proves one thing, it's that the only constant is change. Which of course leaves us with one last big question. What does a next revolution sound like?